So we're going to start, and I'm giving a very warm welcome to everyone. Not sure how many people will show up, but I think the topic has hit resonated, hit a nerve. There's about 125 people that have registered for the special event today. And I'm so delighted to be bringing it to you. So I want to introduce myself. My name is Diane Kaufman. I'm coming to you from Portland, Oregon. And I am a poet, artist, child psychiatrist, and I'm the founder director of the Arts and Healing Resiliency Center, which is at Mind Matters PC in Hillsboro, Oregon. And this is our inaugural debut of How It Feels, which is part of a monthly special events series through the Arts and Healing Resiliency Center. I'd like to tell you a little bit about what the center is about. The inspired mission of the Arts and Healing Resiliency Center is to honor and practice the caring art of human connection. And through the workshops and special events, and hopefully when COVID is finally abated, we can go back into groups. Here in Oregon, we'll be having in-person workshops and also therapy and mentoring. And the Arts and Healing Resiliency Center is a safe haven for arts expression and self-creation. You might have seen this when you registered on Eventbrite. I'm going to be showing you the full painting, but this is a painting that I had done. Again, the Arts and Healing Resiliency Center has expressive arts workshops. It's a salon for us to have conversation with each other, and also a creative studio. This is the full painting of that I showed you before. And I did it at a process arts workshop a number of years ago. And initially I had called it Bird of Prey, P-R-E-Y, / Bird of Prey, P-R-A-Y. And then only recently I was looking at it again with sort of a new understanding, and I renamed it because I saw it differently. I called it Phoenix Bird Rising. And if you know the myth of the phoenix, it's a beautiful one in the world mythic bird that resurrects itself as a new bird from its own ashes. So my wish for all of us is that we should be the phoenix bird, rising up, renewed, and reborn. Here's a sweet picture of me from when I was a little girl, probably about 7 or 8 years old then. And I'm looking up. Who knew that many decades later, this photo would be used for this purpose, but asking, what does our past, present, and future yearn to create? And in thinking about that, I'd like to share with you a quote from the phenomenal dancer Martha Graham, who said, "There is a vitality, a life force, an energy, a quickening that is translated through you into action. And because there is only one of you in all time, this expression is unique. And if you block it, it will never exist through any other medium and will be lost." I want to share with you, I think, an example of that life force. This is a photo of me at a arts and healing workshop when I had first come to Oregon. I'm originally from the East Coast, and this was about 8 years ago. And at that workshop, we made paper dolls. And I'm going to show you, I still have that paper doll, which I keep in my sort of creative office. And the paper doll, I named her Braveful, Braveful, which was to help me with my fearfulness. And on her, I wrote, or it's typed, together, Braveful and I, together we make more now. So thinking about that paper doll and creativity and that life force, I think perhaps it's about when you're one with that creativity, when you're one with your courage and braveness, which comes from vitality, then you're fully alive, right? And then, you know, there's the other part, which is when we're not feeling fully alive. How can we help ourselves and help our loved ones when that life force of vitality wavers to extinction from anxiety, trauma, depression, bipolar disorder, other forms of mental illness, and societal illness, violence, and social injustice? How do we go on? How do we survive? How do we find meaning? And how can we make a contribution? And I want to share on a personal note that I have experienced myself anxiety, traumatic experience, depression, bipolar 2 disorder. When I was in my 20s, I had attempted suicide, and it was so severe. I was at that point medically hospitalized. I could have been psychiatrically admitted, but by that time, when I was stable, I was no longer in an acute state. It would have needed to be voluntary. And back then, when this all happened, I actually was a medical student. And I said to myself, I think partly because of even the more so shame and stigma from 40 years ago, I thought to myself, how could I possibly be a psychiatrist if I ever were admitted to the psych unit? And so I wasn't admitted. I'm interested in the topic of how it feels from a personal point of view, as well as a mental health care provider. But I want to talk about what the how it feels vision is. And that vision is to provide a deep dive, compassionate and healing look into creativity and mental illness as shared by those with lived experience, to increase our awareness, increase our hope, and to foster our resilience. So with that introduction, I am so happy to announce our Creativity and Mental Illness, How the Arts Nurture Resilience, with Krispy DeRato, who is a composer, music producer, multi-instrumentalist. I want to let you know how Krispy and I crossed paths. So back in November, I had written a poem on suicide loss. I have experienced suicide loss of family member, friend, patient, and also a mental health colleague. And I had recently joined a Facebook page in support of survivors of suicide loss. And in reading the postings, not only was there the devastation of losing one beloved person, but some of the people posting were also talking about multiple members of their families who had died by suicide. And that inspired me to write a poem, which I thought could be a song. And I called it Wishing You Were Still Here. And I posted it looking for musicians, singers, arrangers, producers to co-create a song from that poem. And Crispy was one of the individuals, one of the artists who responded to that posting. And I want to read what she had sent to me in her submission. She said, in reference to the poem that I wrote, the poem was quite powerful and reminds me of not only my own lost loved ones, but the intense feelings I get with wanting to leave this world myself, as I once struggled with for so long. My entire adolescence was a battle with my mental health in and out of hospitals. And so I am very passionate about topics such as these in my own music. As someone who worked hard to navigate their neurodivergency for many years, music has become my main form of emotional connection to others. So reading this and also listening to some of the music that Crispy shared with me, I wanted to get to know Crispy as an artist and also as a human being, right? And it shouldn't be either one or the other, it's a combination. It ended up that I had chosen someone else for the Wishing You Were Still Here project, but very much was considering Crispy for other projects. And I'm so delighted, and I feel that it's quite auspicious that I can share with you Crispy, who's going to be with us in just a moment, and also share with you that just today, I received notice that the Rome, Italy Music Video Awards has honored as an honorable mention the Wishing You Were Here for Best Lyrics. And I just think it's amazing. It's the same day that I'm also having this special event. So at this point, I want to share with you Crispy, and we can start with also Crispy telling us a bit about her own mental health background. I know from what she shared with me, and she'll be telling us more, that the severity of what she was going through began when she was 14 through 24 years old, that there were very many emergency room visits, also some leading to inpatient admissions, AMA from inpatient sites, day treatment, residential treatment. The difficulties have included borderline personality, eating disorder, anorexia, agoraphobia, also trichotillomania, panic disorder. Of course, having outpatient therapy, inpatient, as I mentioned, upwards through residential, been on medicine, been off of medicine. Everyone has their unique story. So I want us all to experience Crispy in terms of her own uniqueness. She very much shared with me the role that her creativity and music played in her life. And I'd like Crispy to start talking to us now.
Hello, and thank you. So, hi, my name is Krispy DeRato. I am a musician, music producer, songwriter, multi-instrumentalist, and recently, thanks to TikTok, I am now a self-proclaimed siren because I found a bit of a niche over there in creating, using my whistle tone, so to speak, to create these atmospheric, emotional kind of experiences for all the viewers and whatnot, which I've really come to appreciate. So, yeah, I have been a musician essentially all my life. I can remember, baby videos of me when I could first talk, just like trying to sing along to songs and things like that. And yeah, so it's always been a part of me. I actually did go to school for music, college and everything, but it wasn't until this past year where I really took the career seriously and tried to make something for myself in terms of having a name and whatnot to really work towards in music. And also, just for reference, you may notice a lovely hole in my teeth. I'm also a passionate roller skater, and the ramp just looked a little too tasty to pass up a couple months ago. So it's a slow healing process until I get my teeth back in order. But for now, it's something I've come to embrace. So yeah, in terms of the music that I have written, it is, as Diane mentioned, it is very deeply intertwined with my mental health, because I have been through a lot of individual experiences, in and out of different institutions and facilities and doctors, inpatient or outpatient. And so it was something that really shaped my adolescence entirely. It really did. I had to battle, times where it was either school or hospitals and things like that. And that's not a decision that many people want to have to go through. But when it gets to a certain point, these are things you just have to make a choice. And so my choice was to focus on mental health because that was the choice that just had to be made. But through all of that, I took it very seriously. And I know that I am in a very fortunate position where I have a wonderful support system at home to help me get through what I've been going through. But by no means has it been easy or simple to navigate. Oftentimes it feels very much like many burned bridges and just lost opportunities, but it's easy to want to think that way when, it seems that way, but it's also easy. It's something you have to remind yourself of is that just because it seems that way does not truly mean it's always been that way. And it's easier to be convinced that it's always been difficult when you're already at the bottom, So I guess that's a huge part of me trying to build resilience through my music and being able to use my music as a way to communicate throughout my whole life. Diane, did you have something?
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, could you, for example, in terms of mental health, describe to us intensity of feelings that you've had? For example, let's say having a panic attack. How does that feel for you? In terms of anger or wanting to either hurt oneself, one's body, or even to use it as a form of distraction, although that's not the best way to cut yourself, to distract yourself, not advocating that. But just describe from your own lived experience what some of what we call or what we know of as, quote, mental health difficulties, how that feels, how that manifests.
Sure. So having borderline personality disorder has been one of the biggest things, one of the biggest hurdles for me to figure out. And I would say that because just in having borderline, it causes you to feel on such an intense scale and on a scale that you can't see coming, essentially. So, it's like, it's not 0 to 100, it's 0 to 1,000 and through the roof plus an explosion on top. It's you can't ever predict, in the beginnings. That's where I really struggled, was that my emotions were very erratic and difficult. They were not stable in terms of the fact that I would be easily affected by things. I wouldn't be able to brush things off. And so these things would spiral. For example, it could be something as valid as, someone legitimately saying something that I felt wronged by. However, it was, it was a combination of, yes, people may say things that don't sit right with me, but it's also, I think, a certain sense of my own responsibility to recognize how these things make me feel, how to, if these situations can't be avoided, how can I just not allow my emotions to immediately get the best of me and rather sit back, remove myself from a situation and think, logically through it before I proceed to act and speak. And it led to a lot of bridges I felt that were burned back in the day, in terms of like high school and whatnot, and even into college, where it wasn't necessarily that, I ever wanted to be vindictive and go out of my way to hurt people. But what I felt like was a big fear of abandonment in me, which is very prominent in those with BPD, in that I very much struggled to have a sense of self. So, when I don't have a sense of self, it just made it very difficult for me to really associate with anybody and really connect with people as I needed to. And so, that compounded on top of the fact that I'm afraid that I don't want anything to go poorly because I won't be able to handle it if it does, I would tend to retreat anyway. So it led to a very long period of my life where I just became very socially isolated. And that was very difficult to handle. Because again, I think nowadays the support systems that I've built up are some of the most important parts of my recovery. But when it comes to things like panic attacks specifically, so I have struggled with agoraphobia now since 2017, on and off. But at times it has left me housebound for months, with the exception of my parents dragging me out to a doctor's appointment or something like that. This time last year, I had a business or actually over a year ago now, about a year and a half ago, I had a dog grooming business, a mobile dog grooming business that I had started up. And that essentially came crashing down because my agoraphobia got so severe, in which before I would even leave the house to go groom a dog, I would start to panic about every potential thing that could go wrong. And these panic attacks wouldn't just manifest in the form of just, heavy breathing and heart racing. And, they would manifest, they started out that way, at the beginnings, but over years and years of having this, it was, people would look at me and they would say, "Are you having a seizure?" My eyes, I would lose motor function. It would manifest in ways that were very uncomfortable, to say the least. It wasn't just like when people say panic attacks or it just feels like the end of the world. Yes, it absolutely does, but it's not just in your brain, it's in your entire body, just like going haywire and shutting down in ways that are not fun and scary in the moment, because it feels like that's all that will be, like I said earlier, when you're in the darkest of the dark and the worst of the worst, it's hard to see out of that. And so when you're going through a specific moment where, your motor functions are causing you to act out and maybe, punch yourself or punch a wall. And thankfully, I was never one to act out and punch others, but I did take it out on myself, which was difficult to deal with over time. Self-injury is not something that I took very lightly and still don't to this day. And I'm proudly, have done a lot of work with my therapists over the years to mitigate my coping mechanisms to be less harmful to me. And that's something that I had to work on. It's not like you can just expect to replace something that you relied on for so long, but over time, it's a matter of really being resilient and working at it, because your brain can be rewired. It just won't happen overnight. It requires a lot of work for me to go from wanting to default to these very intense coping mechanisms that were harmful and could potentially land me in a hospital, which was never going to be helpful in the end. But it's hard to see that in the moment, so you see that as your way out. And
Krispy, we have a question from Rochelle. She's asking, did your agoraphobia, was it impacted by the COVID-19 quarantine and isolation?
So Yes and no. It was actually very interesting that when the bulk of the quarantine was happening in earlier 2020, that was when I was actually starting my grooming business. There was, I'll get to this eventually, but there was a period of time, 3 years or so, where I was not doing music. And so during this time, I was grooming. So this was actually the tail end of my grooming time, the last year of 2020. And this was during quarantine. And so I was kind of in luck in a way that it almost worked to my advantage briefly, where people, everything was shut down. And so people, A, they needed to have their dogs groomed. B, I wasn't able to work in a shop for A, everything was closed and I just was too scared. Um, and so it kind of worked out where through word of mouth, just Kings Park moms and things like that, where I live, we got, I got a bunch of clients essentially they would just, through a social distancing method, they would just bring their dog to my garage, which had a nice warm setup and a just at home setup. But this allowed me to basically groom in isolation, so to speak, and be able to kind of gain clientele just through online word of mouth and things like that, and do everything appropriately and safely because everything was so like it was just me in my garage, with a separate handoff. So, it actually worked in my advantage in that I was able to have something to do and to work towards in like by myself, kind of without the need to, I was already a bit antisocial this time. So it wasn't like I was going to be going out anyway. So the fact that everyone else was forced to be kind of in the situation that I was kind of already living in worked in my advantage in a very interesting way. And again, it wasn't easy by any means. Like eventually I did lose my business and things like that due to mental health. But again, during the brief time when quarantine was in its heaviest, I find that it was almost working to my advantage because I was already so not involved in the world, it wasn't like I was going to be missing much, so to speak.
Krispy, could you say something about eating disorder, anorexia, and history with that and where you're at now with that?
Sure. So in terms of my eating disorder history, I was formally diagnosed with EDNOS, which stands for eating disorder not otherwise specified. And that's just because of the fact that I've been through many cycles of different eating disorders throughout the years. So it all kind of began, in general, all of my symptoms, I would say, for most mental health really began at 14. But with my eating disorder specifically, all throughout my childhood, I did struggle with my image and being comfortable in my own skin. So I think, but it wasn't until about 14 where I really started to, act on these feelings in a negative behavior. So at 14, it began with attempting to just restrict and in ways that I didn't have enough knowledge to do in a healthy way. But I'd struggled with bouts of purging at times, bulimic tendencies. I had struggled with a lot of restriction throughout high school and whatnot. But then it was actually in college where well, also, mind you, I almost forgot to mention medication throughout high school also caused me to struggle with binging towards the end of high school. So I'd gone through a little bit of everything already kind of at that point. But then in college, I started bodybuilding because that's always been a passion of mine. And so I took it on for myself and I was really into fitness. And so unfortunately, as somebody with a bit of a all or nothing attitude, I took it to the extreme to the point where I would have a panic attack if I didn't eat exactly to the gram every day. And that's not sustainable either. So, the fixation became a bit too unhealthy in terms like on the fixation on being healthy became unhealthy, essentially. People call that orthorexia. I'm not so sure how common that term is, but just, that fixation was not good for me. And then after that, I ended up kind of rebounding and binging heavily, putting on weight to the point where I was just over 200 pounds. after being, a fit 140, 130-pound bodybuilder. So, it was quite the change for a short couple of months. And then as of recently, I've kind of been, leveling out, struggling on and off with, more restrictive habits. But for the most part, in recent months, things have been pretty leveled out. So essentially, I've been up and down through the ringer in
Wow.
every way, shape, and form. I've had it all with the eating disorders.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Crispy, for so honestly, authentically, caringly sharing, your story. Could you say maybe just a little bit about the down moods in terms of depression,
Sure.
suicidal thinking, if there were any suicide attempts?
So as somebody with borderline, suicidal ideation is something that many of us struggle with, which is no joke. It leads to a lot of impulsive actions in terms of self-harm and things like that, which I dealt with for a long time. And I mean, for me personally, I found that suicidal ideation and or impulsivity was more closely tied to the impulsiveness of BPD than it was the depression, which again, I suffered with through BPD. It's a little different when you have BPD to have depression than it is to just have depression by itself. But regardless, for me, depression has really manifested in situations where I have no sense of self. And this sense of self leads me to a point where I feel like I'm going through motions, and that something that I can very much relate to that a friend of mine actually said recently was about just kind of going through the motions in the hopes that it will get better kind of thing. And that was the mentality that I felt like I would be in when I was very much in a depressive episode, is that nothing that I did mattered. Like I could logically, I could look at all these accomplishments, but they wouldn't have any meaning. And that emptiness would just eat away at me, and, and it's not to say that I was particularly productive. It's not like I was as productive as I was when I was feeling good, but I couldn't even look back at past accomplishments and be like, oh, look how far you truly have come, even if you're going through a slump now. And, sometimes productivity would completely come to a screeching halt when I felt so empty. What's the point of working on something if I'm not going to get anything out of it? And so these were things that I did have to push through. But I think one of the best ways to push through it is just to, as cliche as it is, the fake it till you make it is kind of works. It worked for me sometimes in bodybuilding, and it works for me in terms of music and creativity and just getting through my days and emotional regulation. In that sometimes the hardest part of getting started is just to get started. And as empty as it may feel, even when you do get started, and maybe it won't bring you anything in the immediate future, but just the fact that you are able to get yourself to accomplish a task that doesn't feel like there'll be much there, that in and of itself is, I think, an accomplishment, and, that was a big thing for me to be able to push through these depressive episodes. And another thing is also just the fact to know that everything comes in waves. We cannot, it's not realistic to, like, they may be some longer, some shorter, but they're like every emotion and everything that we go through comes in waves. So sometimes that fake it till you make it is just until, something shifts either in you or externally that allows you to be in a better headspace. But I think a big part of it is just the resiliency of just pushing through, as much as it might seem and feel futile in that time.
Crispy, from your experiences, what do you think has been helpful or not helpful in like family members or friends speaking to you when you've been distressed?
So when in doubt, whenever anyone tries to minimize what you're stressed about, never helps. It could be a very silly thing that I'm stressed about. It could literally be, looking back, something as goofy as someone that I barely know made a comment and it's bothering me. Like, in reality, who are they? A stranger on the internet to truly affect who I am. But sometimes, it would get the best of me. And I don't know, it was just for them to just say, like, don't worry about it. It's not that big of a deal. Or like, stop, just calm down. What is that ever going to do? Because in the moment, I'm not in a headspace to be able to just be like, oh yeah, all right, you're right. Like I'm not in when I'm in a distressed mode, I think it's just very important for me and the people around me to recognize that I am in a state of distress. Like my, so that being said, like when you're in a state of distress, it's very difficult, if not impossible, to have a sense of empathy, compassion, connection, really think with a sound, logical head. So when people are telling you these things that in their brain sound so simple, so logical, it's just not going to click. It's only going to cause more of that, I think, in the long run. And so I think instead of people trying to minimize and make people's, things feel like they aren't important, I think the most important thing is just to listen and to recognize that what they're going through is valid and that they might not be looking for advice is also important. And I'm guilty of that in the past as well, is sometimes thinking that when somebody is venting or going through something that they're looking for advice, when in reality they need nothing more than just somebody to listen and to validate what they're going through. And I think that's a big thing for me, is just to not invalidate by minimizing, by ignoring, by neglecting, by trying to push on, just anytime in any way that I felt invalidated, that never helped.
And what advice would you give from your experiences, let's say to a mental health provider, two or three things that you think are important in terms of a mental health provider being with someone, who's in distress?
Someone specifically in distress. So my therapist personally, one of my therapists, I really actually do like this one thing that they always reference. If I bring it up and they're here now, they might laugh, but it's the polyvagal states. It's the 3 states of emotion. So, on the top, you have rest, digest, you have freeze, collapse, or you have rest, digest, excuse me, you have fight or flight, and you have freeze, collapse. And essentially being up here means that you are emotionally sound, you are stable, you are comfortable, you are able to communicate openly with others. Fight or flight basically means that, something is causing you anxiety, something causes you to want to fight, to fight back, to whatever, get defensive. And then freeze. Oh, thank you for the hand tattoos. I just saw a little something coming in. And then the freeze collapse is essentially just a complete closed off emotional sense of, I don't want to do this. I don't have the energy, the time, the anything, just a sense of defeat almost in an emotional sense. And when I'm going through something that is very emotionally charged and I am in distress, I've actually found it really, really helpful for my therapist to literally bring me back to my body, because sometimes that's not easy for me to do myself. And over time, I've gotten better at that. But to quite literally in the moment, like say, you are in like one of these two down here, like I don't know, it's just for my therapist to quite literally just tell me, like, biologically everything that you were going through, it's like biologically validating what I'm going through, so with that, it's like what I'm going through is a natural human response to something, and for her to just essentially tell me that and just point out these obvious facts about what my body is going through, it kind of just causes me to focus on that rather than what emotions are causing me to be that way. I think the focus on that mind body connection has been a really big help in terms of just bringing me to a better place. I know people always say, like, try deep breathing and this, that, and the other. And personally for me, like I understand the like deep breathing. I like to use the word control your lungs because it just gives me that sense of control a little bit more if I really do get out of control. But I think it's very important to be a grounding source for somebody. And that isn't to always provide answers, but that is just to bring them to a place where they are able to think about the problems when they're in a better headspace, you know, to kind of remind them that you're not going to solve anything when you're thinking like this. You're only going to solve things up here. You're not going to solve anything down here because everything is clouded and mushy, you know? So I think that's a really big important thing, is just the validation through body and mind connection has really been helpful for me. And that was thanks to my therapist that really brought that out.
Thanks, Crispy. I'd like to open it up to everyone in the audience. If you, I guess you could unmute yourself. And if you have a question or you'd like to ask Crispy, or a comment that you'd like to make. And while we're waiting to see if someone wants to do that, maybe Crispy, do you want to look at the chat? Because there were some questions also directed to you.
Yes, I'm taking a look at that now, actually. So let's see. What is my way of coping now? Is the one that I missed first. So nowadays, when I get to a place where I feel emotionally overwhelmed, my first thing to do is, and mind you, I have built up over the past many years, especially this year, the resiliency to be able to recognize this sooner. But I feel like when these things start to occur and I start to feel like I'm relapsing either emotionally or in my actions, the first thing to do is to recognize it. And only then can I truly remove myself from it. And through that, I've found that I have certain support systems that I can reach out to, but if they're not available, within myself, just I found little small things in my body, literally like ticking style things that I have found are ways to help me bring myself back to my body. I have worked with an acupuncturist for the past couple of months that has taught me some various small tapping techniques, and I'm working on applying those. But even before I started working on more conventional, techniques in terms of coping, back when things were very intense, I would even go so far as to just splash immensely cold water on my face and force myself, like, to shock myself out of a panic. I have since obviously music is the biggest distraction that I have ever found, which I'll be getting into. But essentially the biggest thing for me is recognizing what ultimately causes these moments of spiraling. And for me personally, a lot of it had to do with this strong, I guess you could say, existentialism around a lack of self and just a lack of an ability to, what I felt like at the time, function normally, in society, is what it felt like to me when I was hiding away. And obviously that's not the case now, but finding that sense of self through hobbies like roller skating and music and just things like that. And just those are really the things that I found to just distract myself and remove myself. And again, it's only been through years and years of work on recognizing the early signs of spiraling, like the early signs of these intrusive thoughts. When I recognize what those are is when it's easier for them to fight it off, which took a long time. But let's see what else here. Apologies if it's slightly off topic. Do you have an experience with somebody's difficulty in finding an outlet? In finding an outlet in general. So for me personally, music has always been there for me. But when I wasn't doing music, because there was 3 years after college where I kind of resented it because of just college experiences and just a lot of things that happened personally. But during that time when I was not doing music, I very much was struggling with a sense of self in certain ways, but I found it in others, in that, like, I loved animals. I loved doing hair. And so I started becoming a dog groomer. And, ultimately it was just because I needed a job at the time, but I was able to kind of turn that into a passion by itself. And I think that one of the biggest things is to think outside the box, because the fact is everybody is so vastly different and unique. And even the most niche things that you might be into, you are bound to find people into those things. And sometimes it's even as exciting as just thinking outside of the box in terms of what are two broad things that I like, that I just happen to enjoy. And are there things that people have done to already combine them? And it just takes a little bit of creativity and looking on forums online. I know Reddit things, so people always have things on Reddit with different passions and hobbies. Literally even YouTube. A lot of people have, they have YouTube channels where they are already a part of a community, and it's through that you can start to just find other people. It's just a matter of thinking outside of the box, being open to different things, and acknowledging that the things that you've enjoyed in the past, like even if you haven't found ways to inherently be passionate other than just by like consuming it, maybe you just enjoy the sound of music, but you don't want to make it or something, there are outlets for everybody in every facet of what everyone likes to do. So I think it's just a matter of thinking outside of the box, and reaching out through different communities, especially online, because online is honestly a really good place to just start and look. A couple more things here. Let's see. Thank you guys all very so much. Let's see. I enjoyed. Oh, thank you for listening to my music as well. Self-harming can be eating disorders, drug addictions, hurting your own skin, feeling isolated in your own world, your own mind. So important to reach out. Oh, thank you for saying I am brave as well. That's the other thing is, when it comes to self-harm, there are so many facets of self-harm. And I think it just comes to, obviously, there are generalized things that aren't good for nobody, but you also have to be important and honest with yourself, like are specific things not serving you as well. And it may serve somebody else, but not you. And that's something I think that comes with being honest with yourself about. Med switches and struggles with that. Many. I have a front to back list of all the medications I've essentially been on, with all the fun side effects I've had to deal with. For me personally, it's not something that particularly worked for me. And that, I think that has to do with the fact that one of my biggest issues is my personality disorder, which oftentimes is more of a therapeutic based treatment. Not to say that, there aren't times when, certain anti-anxiety medications and antidepressants and things like that may have helped and may have slightly in the past for me and will absolutely help others. But for me, I've gone through a lot with medication. It messed up my hormones here and there, but it also, at times fixed things. It's just, medication is not something to be taken for granted. It affects the body a lot and the mind a lot. And sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. For me, not always for the best, but I don't deny that it has definitely helped many out there. Just a couple other things here. Let's see. Some practitioners want to know about your state of mind, but don't always know what to do. I had that experience, and I consider promoting your experiences like writing a book. A book. I have not thought about writing a book yet, although I feel like I've got more than enough words to fill up like a nice 1,000-page.
Yeah.
But
I would encourage you to write a book, right? Or do a TED Talk. Really, you're so fluent and have so much to share, really.
I would consider it at some point, maybe. Maybe after a little more experience, but
So how about we now segue into your music? You want to share, right?
Yeah, sure. So I guess I will share my screen here real quick. Okay. So, let me go to my first video, which is not this one. So welcome to my YouTube channel. I made it myself. And so I might be an advertisement. So yes. All right. So I wanted to start with Metamorphosis of the Mind, which is my debut single that I released, the music version back in April, and then the music video here, May 8th. And this was made essentially just with three of us. Essentially, it was me doing all of the music, and then Dylan, my wonderful, wonderful friend who I've known for many years as the main film guy, and then his wonderful friend Aya helping out here and there. But I just say that the music video specifically, I just want to notice something I'm very proud of is my first debut. We wanted to come out swinging, but the music itself. So I wrote this throughout the winter of 2019, 2020. Oh, excuse me. I wrote this throughout the winter of 2020, 2021. I forget we're already in 2022 now, my goodness. But yes, last year I was writing this tune, and it actually started out as nothing more than an instrumental beat that I released. Not even released, it was a sample for just like an Instagram thing on my old account where I was just like, I'm broke and sad about it, so I'm gonna write a beat. And it was like this silly little goofy thing that I had made. But I was like, this kind of has potential. So I started messing around with it and ended up making lyrics and singing and recording again. And I was like, this is something I think worth releasing. And it was all during this time that I was brainstorming, the music career in general. But in terms of the lyrics for this tune, I actually came up with Metamorphosis of the Mind first, the title, which is not actually in the song at all. However, now I was going through a very difficult time this time last year. I had closed my business in the fall of last year, and I was recovering, trying to figure out everything in terms of finances moving forward and just life moving forward. So I was going through a lot in terms of intrusive thoughts, and things of that nature. And so that's kind of where the inspiration came from for the lyrics, in which I'll just read them out real quick before I show the music video, because I just want you guys to hear them because they go quick in the song. But the idea was essentially that the you in the song is my intrusive thoughts. They're not actually a person. They are my thoughts personified, so to speak, as somebody taking over me, taking my control of me. And so the verses start out with, you hypnotize me every time, keep me safe inside, you protect my mind. When you tell me everything will be okay, but I can't believe that you're here to stay. And so that's verse 1, which essentially is alluding to the fact that, in my mind, I was leading myself to believe that these intrusive thoughts were in fact real. They were my reality, and I believed that they were safe. And so I stayed inside and I stayed with my thoughts. And essentially going into the chorus, which I was very proud of this here. It's actually a loop, which is kind of supposed to just allude to the fact that it felt never ending at the time. It goes, your voice is inside of me, all around me, your authority. You bring out these insecurities. It is taking control of my grasp on this reality to assume that I could ever see what was never really meant to be. I was blinded by comfort in your voice is inside of me, all around me, your authority. And it would just continue the cycle like that. So yeah, the idea was essentially just me finding comfort in these intrusive thoughts, believing that they are in fact keeping me safe and in a place where this is just my reality, when in fact I was not living my truth. I was not happy. I was not, truly safe and comfortable, even in my own mind. And yet I was led to believe that over many years of fighting. And then just going into verse 2, it just continued with, I scrutinize my every flaw to conceal your guise, one that I never saw. Now I'm left here searching for another way to escape these emotions. They're taking me over. I can't even try to protect my mind. And then that would go into a whistle tone that is supposed to kind of allude to just kind of yelling into the void, kind of just this scream for help, so to speak. And then it continues with the chorus one last time. So yeah, the lyrics are very intense, but they really are quite an open reflection of just the intrusive thoughts that I was going through at that time and how they kept me housebound for a very long time. They kept me afraid of the world, afraid to communicate. And yet that's what I believed was a safe space, which was a ruse, so to speak. So I'm going to play this now, I suppose. And the music video, again, is essentially telling the visual representation exactly of the lyrics. I'm also just going to get a drink while this plays, but I don't need to be here. So enjoy. And this, yeah, I'll just get it going here. Let me know if the volume is good as well, please, before I walk off. So that is Metamorphosis of the Mind. That was the debut. Coming out swinging. Oh no, Squarespace, don't advertise to me. So yeah, that is Metamorphosis of the Mind. That was the debut, all about just intrusivity and just fighting your personal demons, essentially.
Crispy, what's it like you're watching that, knowing that came through you?
Looking back now, I'm just really proud of it, honestly, because that's the thing is like, I feel like music is nothing more than, well, it's a lot more than, but it is a snapshot, of your life in that moment. And so looking back at that, it's like, not only am I proud of the product, given just how little of a team and budget we had, and the fact that, that second half, just the ending chorus with all the stop motion, like that 3 seconds where I'm flying in the air, that took us an hour and 15 minutes of me just laying in one spot on a hardwood floor, not able to move. Like I couldn't even adjust where my shoulder was cramping after 20 minutes. And he would adjust every finger, every ruffle of my hair, everything of the coat for an hour and a half, like almost. It was a lot of work. And so looking back at that, like, I'm just proud of it, about how not only it represents me, but also just it represents where I was at that time and how far I've come since. Let me just check the chat real quick, and then I'll go on to the next one as well after this. But yes, in terms of enjoying the process, as much work as it was, I loved it, because this was also kind of how I learned how to roller skate. I started that was my first pair of skates, and I really learned by sweeping up the psych center. That's an abandoned psych center, by the way, in my town. That we filmed in, which was even more fitting. So yeah, I kind of learned by sweeping that place up, and it was a lot of fun. So yeah, it feels just very empowering to look back on, to listen to, and all of that as well. But moving forward, I want to segue into the second song of the music video, Crisp Cinematic Universe, I like to call it. There might be an advertisement. Oh, there isn't. So Faye is song number 2 in the release lineup. And this one was done with nothing more than me on a longboard and a nice dress, and my friend who I gave my camera attached to this very camera gimbal. And I said, follow me. So, even less of a budget than the last one. But again, it's just more about the creative process, I think, than anything. And so the song itself, I think the lyrics are on this, and if they're not, yes, they are. So Faye was the second song in the Crispy lineup. And essentially, this was my letting go anthem, so to speak. Whereas Metamorphosis of the Mind was all about, being trapped by these intrusive thoughts that I just did not think I was going to be able to escape for a while. And Faye was written not long after, and mind you, the instrumental itself was over a year old and went through many alterations of trusting the process before it even got to what it is. But it was really about just letting go of the fact that, like, I wasn't happy with myself and the way that I had led my mind to just kind of play victim to every difficult thing I had gone through. And not to say that those things weren't rightfully valid and difficult, but it's up to me ultimately to take personal responsibility. I think my biggest thing that I wrote at the time was that I have every ability to take back my power. And that's just essentially, that's what this song ended up becoming. So the lyrics themselves, I thought was very exciting, very smart. Whereas Metamorphosis of the Mind, with butterflies being kind of a part of the theme of the title, I wanted to continue that with Faye. So I said, I could use a little help. I've got these butterflies inside of me unwillingly. Is anybody there to remind me why they always take air? These wings inside of me tell me all I need to know, why I'm so suddenly ready to let go, because there's only room to grow. And that's the opening verse. But yeah, essentially that was kind of just alluding to the fact that I truly did feel uneasy. And kind of like, if anyone's familiar with tarot cards, the Fool is a card that kind of represents just embarking on a journey without having it all planned out, but just doing so anyway and trusting the fact that you'll figure it out as you go. And that's kind of where this song came in. And so as the beat kind of opens up and everything, it just says, I remember all the things I wanted to hear when I didn't have the words. So I fill these veins with the sunshine in the California haze. The future holds better days. And then the chorus is nothing more than float away. And continuing on, it just says, the ground and everything below me, it feels so far away. High a line, open skyline tells me I'm fine. Everything will be okay. And it continues with the final chorus, excuse me. So, between those two very short verses, it's essentially just me remembering. When I say I remember all the things I wanted to hear, I'm just kind of talking about how, I wanted to hear positivity, but I was not able to give that to myself. And so now it's kind of, when I say I fill these veins with the sunshine and the California haze, those are kind of all a bit of kind of allusion to different drugs and things like that, to say sunshine and California haze and filling these veins. But it's not necessarily alluding directly to drug use. It's alluding to literally pumping myself, forcing myself to be to just change directions and to force this kinds of mindset into me, to fill my veins with a sense of light, with sunshine, with love, essentially. And so saying that the future holds better days is essentially that's the whole point. The ground and everything below me feels so far away. At this point, I feel like I've truly let go. High line, open skyline tells me I'm fine, is everything will be okay. It's like, that's the point, when you've embarked on the journey without the things, but by trusting the process, you are knowing that it's okay. And so that being said, the music video, also just as a small side note, was filmed on the trails just outside of the psych center where we filmed the first one. So I quite literally ended up floating away and broke 3 of the walls that I was trapped in at the end of the last. So here we are. Here's Faye. I could use a little help. I've got these butterflies inside of me, unwillingly. Is anybody there to remind me why they always take care? These things inside of me tell me all I need to know. Why am I so outside of me? Ready to let go. one's Faye. So yeah, they run quite parallel in the fact that different styles for sure, but similar kind of continuous storyline and meaning. Oh, let me check the chat real quick here. Okay, we're good. So yeah, those are the two videos essentially. And obviously, one of the most exciting things about them for me is the fact that they do include skating, and that I've kind of chosen to include various aspects of my hobbies, you know, into my videos. And at this point, skating is like a staple. I'm planning, you know, a roller disco for my next music video. So, you know, I'm excited that it's really become a part of it, because not only is it such a fantastic community of people, and I've met so many great friends through it, but makes for some really visually pleasing content, I think.
Krispy, can you share with us your siren songs
Oh, yes. Let me share a siren. I forgot about those.
and explain about that?
Sure. Yeah. So sorry, I have to go onto TikTok, which you're going to get a goofy looking video at first, I'm sure. Okay. So my siren songs, essentially, this started in probably June. And I was basically, I started doing those whistle tones that you heard in both of those songs, the higher pitched voices that sound very just siren-esque in a way. They kind of resonated with a lot of the folks over on TikTok, it seemed. Follow me over there if you got an account and you want to. Hi, Krispy DeRato on all platforms. But yeah, essentially, they are just resonant whistle tones that I have that are very, I would like to say, almost like powerful in a way. They don't sound very human, but not, they sound like superhuman, you know? They sound alien in a very cool way. And I feel like I've gotten a lot of responses from people just kind of opening up about how they have gotten a lot of well, not just goosebumps, but like tears, emotions, memories, you know, the best sleep they've ever had, you know, things like that, that I just was like, this is something worth tapping into. And so, you know, between the originals, I've also kind of started creating things like this. Let me just find a good example of all right. So for example, I have to go all the way down to find the right one. Actually, yes, I do. I'm sorry, the pinned videos don't exist. So yeah, this is all these things, me sitting in front of the camera here, and me just doing them. This was me doing the Titanic theme song. So excuse me in advance if it's a little bit loud. I'll turn it down immediately. Is that loud? Is that like horribly loud in that split second?
Try it again.
Hold on, I gotta make it smaller because it's, let me just turn it down here.
Chris, make it a little louder. Good.
Oh, sorry. No, there we go. So essentially, those have become quite a staple of mine over on TikTok and in general. And if you'll see here, unfortunately, it's very small. There we go. You'll see, like, if I were to just even quickly scrolling through the comments, people talking about how like anxiety, It solves them, their dogs. It's peaceful to them. It reminds me of, family members, making them cry. It's something that really I wanted to tap into, because it wasn't just me that was like, I feel something. This is like everybody feels something, and it's something worth checking out and looking into further and making this music. And so I even released a full-length siren song recently, with plans to release another that many people have found useful for sleep or meditation. And now with siren songs, the plan is to hopefully, in the near future, release my own genre called siren core, so to speak, which would just be combining kind of my already existent style with more of a cinematic siren style. And so, just as a small example,
Not really hearing it.
I want to blast you guys away.
Yeah.
So if that kind of came through at all, that's basically the idea. And
Yeah.
if you at least heard the beat, you understand that it's basically sirens on top of a beat, just like that. And I performed that at my most recent show to have a go.
Crispy, could you tell us something about when you were younger, you would imagine, have like an imaginary scene and you would score it in your head?
Oh, yes. So film scoring was kind of my first and foremost passion as a musician and as a composer. And I'm very much hoping soon that that could be a reality. But in the meantime, ever since I was in middle school and high school, one of my main ways of learning how to compose was to create imaginary scenes in my head. These movies did not exist. They were fantastical in my mind. A scene, a setting, something, the characters even. And I would just visualize and kind of conceptualize for myself. And it was through that I actually ended up like writing a lot of my earlier orchestral and more cinematic stuff, because I would just basically score it. I would visualize a movie, and it just as a movie needs music behind it, I would just write the music to these non-existent films. Not to say they were fully fledged films, but
Yeah.
And it was kind of, that was an early part of how I kind of really learned to connect music and emotion into something, because I've always appreciated how film scoring already does that. And to be able to kind of just do it by default of all the music I write really taps into emotion, I think, regardless of if there's actually a movie or not for people.
Crispy, could you right now stop the screen share so we could see you again?
Oh, sure. Actually, there was just the one
Or
last.
is there one more? Good.
Yes. Let me just take care of that one last thing here. So check me out on TikTok and all platforms, by the way, if you want to listen to some good tunes. But so the last thing I just wanted to share real quick, this is not a siren song in any way, but this is something that is very personal to me, in the fact that I'm releasing an upcoming acoustic album. And the first song to be released is going to be out for pre-save in just a few days, so that you can actually hear it on the 21st of January. And then the rest of the album will be out on the 11th of February. So very soon. But that being said, it's called This Canvas is a Reflection. This is the album artwork for it here. Of course, I can't just show you anything like that. But yeah, this is the album artwork here, which is just I made it myself with from a past photo shoot. And the whole point of this 8-song collection is to basically just be a very vulnerable look into my mental health and how it is played in. And so, This Canvas is a Reflection, being the opener, is all about just myself and just, leading into the rest of the songs. But Early Goodbye has to do with, a lot of the times when, it has to do with loss. Birdsong also has to do with loss, return to earth, you know, in their own ways. Like these were times when I was dealing with them at different times. Early Goodbye is 10 years old and I've carried it with me for this long. So it's like, these are not just, you know, songs I wanted to throw together for an album. These are songs that all have an extremely deep meaning to me. So This Is Panic I wanted to share, which is a short tidbit, is something I wrote about 2 years ago now, in which I was very much just, I wanted to write a song literally about having a panic attack and just these end of the world feelings and just personifying that through music. So here we are. Step inside and shut the door. I'm over here around the corner on the floor, reaching out for what is left, to place your hand over my heavy, weightless chest. I'm digging deep to find the words to tell you what I feel, but nothing's coming through. My lungs are gasping with a tiny bit of oxygen. The world is trying to steal from me and take me to my grave. But I'll fight it till the end, 'cause I know the world ain't black and white. It's all the shades of every hint of gray. I know it seems I can't sit still, but in reality, I'm frozen to the core. My hands are shaking, eyes are crying, mind is wandering left and right, but my body seems to just want to sit tight. I'm evolving by the minute, but my mind has reached its limit. I'm not sure I'll make it through this one tonight. So yeah, I just wanted to give you that. Essentially, it's instrumental for the rest of the tune. And then in terms of the lyrics themselves, just going over them briefly, because I feel like for anybody who has gone through immense anxiety, it just is something that will really resonate. But it was just step inside and shut the door. I'm over here around the corner on the floor, reaching out for what is left, to place your hand over my heavy, weightless chest. I'm digging deep to find the words to tell you what I feel, but nothing's coming through. My lungs are gasping for the tiny bit of oxygen the world is trying to steal from me and take me to my grave. But I'll fight it till the end, because I know the world ain't black and white. It's all the shades of every hint of gray. I know it seems I can't sit still, but in reality, I'm frozen to the core. My hands are shaking, eyes are crying, mind is wandering left and right, but my body seems to just want to sit tight. I'm evolving by the minute, but my mind has reached its limit. I'm not sure I'll make it through this one tonight. And then the whole point is that the music takes over the rest of the song, because sometimes words don't do enough. So that's essentially that, which will be coming out in the very near future. I invite you to check it out wherever you can on all platforms, or sign up for the mailing list on my website if you'd like to stay updated. But they're all just very vulnerable deep dives into all my experiences so far as a musician and as a human.
Krispy, what would you say to someone who might say, I'm not creative? Yeah, I'm not a creative person. And do you think that's true? Are there people that are not creative at all?
I think everybody's got levels of creativity, you know, and some people just don't want to, you know, maybe explore it as much as others. But I think everybody has the potential to find something that they are good and creative and enjoy and are passionate about. You know, I think creativity can literally go so far as to people who are in a math or science-based field, just having creativity for the kinds of research that they want to do, and having like genius ideas moving forward, and ingenuity. Like, to me, that's also creativity. I wouldn't say that creativity is limited to just the arts. So that's, yeah. No one is not creative. It's just a matter of how it applies to you.
Yes. Yeah. Anyone want to make any comments or ask any questions of Krispy while we still have her with us? We have a few minutes till the end. And also, meanwhile, you could look, Krispy, at the chat.
Sure. Well, thank you also for following, guys. Oh, we have a hand. What do you do with hands? I don't know how you.
Hiya.
Oh, hi.
Right, hi. I'm from London. Hi. First of all, I just want to thank you for sharing what you have with us. It's been very overwhelming, and it helps like myself and others like us feel not so isolated and not so alone. And I believe that all sorts of art, like this platform, what Diane does, performing arts, singing, writing, creative writing, art itself, which has helped me, has really helped me feel kind of human again, that I've got a worth, a meaning to my life, to actually, you know, a lot of my problems started from childhood trauma and different experiences. I've, especially growing up, as you say, in the US, biracial, a mixed race, we say over here in the UK. And it was difficult, you know, growing up, not knowing where I identified myself. And it was, you know, what you go through when you're so young definitely stays with you for the rest of your life, and as a reflection on you as you go into adulthood. So I just wanted to say I've embraced everything you shared with us, and I'm sure along with others, my friend April's on here as well, a fellow Londoner. We've definitely been dipping in and out of here, finding you, following you and subscribing, and just felt very, thank you, Diane, for introducing us to your world and your music. And I just want to say well done, and being so creative and brave in all what you've done. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you so very much for your kind words and your support as well. I'd like to just, I think at this point, my biggest goal with my music is just to, I don't want people to ever have to go through what I went through. And I know that the fact of the matter is, as humans, we are just going to go through shit. Excuse me. We are going to go through crap, it's going to happen. And it's just a matter of how can I, through my learned experiences, try to just make it better. And through my music is how I've kind of tried to do that so far. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
And somebody had a question here also about trichotillomania specifically. I had actually shaved my head a couple times back in high school because I had pulled out so much that I had bald spots. But I feel like at first it was definitely a little bit difficult to adjust to, because also as a, high school teenager with already a struggling sense of identity, what do you do where you just shaved off your head and now everyone looks at you like the bald girl? But I also I love hair dye and I love experimenting, and just similarly to how I feel like my tooth, I didn't ever look at my tooth when I busted it a couple months ago and say like, oh God, like, please don't look at me. I kind of embraced it. And I was like, yeah, it's cute. It's quirky. It's a badge of honor that I'm that hardcore at the park, And so with Trichotillomania, it was kind of a similar thing in that, yes, I did have my initial struggles and trying to figure out how I felt with it all. But in the end, I was like, for me, I like to dye the peach fuzz. And the fact that it was shorter allowed me to dye it more often without damage, because it was just shave it off, dye it a new color, shave it off, dye it a new color. And, I'm not saying that shaving the head is for everybody. But for me personally, it, it gave me, it was an unexpected sense of power. I think that's the biggest thing, is recognizing that every part of us, although negative may exist, it's like we may find these things about us that we don't find ideal and that we think other people look down upon us for, but it's a matter of personal perspective. And if you truly do have a sense of self that is unbreakable, I think it can be, these don't have to be negatives. They can serve as, inspiration for others rather than just things that bring you down, because it's all a part of a human experience, not saying everyone's going to bust their teeth or have to shave their head or pull their hair out, but you know, just anything people are uncomfortable with, whether it be a part of their identity, the appearance, or themselves. It's to recognize we're all going through something is, I think, the most beneficial thing about my music is that I can really see that through others, and I can share that with others. So yeah, Trichotillomania into music segue. After that. But
Thank you
yeah,
so much.
thank
Are
you.
there are there any other chat comments you want to read out loud?
I just wanted to double check here if there are
Yeah.
any missed questions. Just a side note, yes, that also was my voice on the siren songs. That's all like unpitch corrected whistle tones. I've got a bit of a piano sized vocal range, so I like to use that when I can. But in terms of this, and thank you everyone who has said anything, words, kind words, support, and or just related experiences. I really appreciate you guys all for being here. And thank you also so much, Diane, for having me be a part of this. This was kind of my first experience into being able to just openly talk about this and how it relates to my music. So it was really nice.
Oh, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. I'm so glad that you're shared with us today. So I wanted to mention that the Arts and Healing Resiliency Center meets on a Saturday, Portland, Oregon time, 1 to 2 p.m. on a Saturday, 3 times a month. And once a month on a Sunday, such as today, for 90 minutes for a special event. So we will be having the next, what I call Follow Your Art's Heart Saturday workshop, 1 to 2, which is next Saturday. And our next special event will be on February 20th. It's going to be on relationships and insights from cinema. And Dr. Charlene Gelt is going to be presenting on that. If you look on Eventbrite at the Arts and Healing Resiliency Center page, it will list the links to all these upcoming events. And if you want to reach out to me, and I'd love to hear from any of you in terms of your experiences from today or other workshops or ideas you have for the Arts and Healing Resiliency Center, you can reach me at this email. It's Dr. Diane, DRDIANE, at Mind Matters, MINDMATTERS, PC, which stands for Professional Corporation.com. So it's Dr. Diane at mindmatterspc.com. And with that, I'm going to wish all of us a very enjoyable rest of our day. And for those of you who are in London or where it's nighttime, I'm wishing you sweet dreams. Okay, bye everybody.
Thank you. God bless. Bye everyone. Thank you, Krispy. Bye.
Guys also very much, and thank you for the last few comments coming through as well. I just got a chance to see those. So
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye.
Bye.